Mr. Chair, I believe that this particular part of the letter of expectation for Auckland Transport needs to change, because I don't think it's reasonable of us to expect through a letter of expectation that Auckland Transport will comply with something which is in effect optional for developers. This is not something that developers must comply with. They can have regard for the future urban land supply strategy, but if they can afford to go out of sequence, they can apply to go out of sequence. And that's our problem. That's our policy gap. And nothing in the letter of expectation is going to allow us to circumvent that fundamental contradiction. We are expecting compliance from our family, but actually the developers don't have to comply.
Through the Chair, we actually have developed protocols, and these have been circulated to CCOs. It's just that they're not compelled to comply with them at the moment. So the family actually knows what it should be doing, and we're working really hard on that. What we're looking for something now is a bit, and I hear that you were saying, something a little bit more, with a little bit more oomph behind it. So we're investigating that for you. But the letter of expectation can signal that that's what we're doing, so at least the CCOs understand that we're intending to get a little bit tougher on this.
Mr. Chair, I think that there needs to be some very urgent work around this, and it's not through the letters of expectation. I believe that there is a gap that needs to be addressed insofar as the application of the regional policy statement and the unitary plan. Because if the RPS provisions of the unitary plan require that a developer through a structure planning process have regard for the future urban land supply strategy, that's not the same as will comply with. And I've raised this issue before. Until that contradiction is addressed, people who can get lawyered up, and I can quite easily see someone like Russell Bartlett QC marching on in here and saying this letter of expectation is not going to compel my client to just fall into line with the future urban land supply strategy. If that client has the funding to go out of sequence, that client can apply. And I think that we put Auckland Transport in a very difficult position through a letter of expectation, because we're effectively asking them to comply with something that we're not compelling the developers to comply with, because they can actually go out of sequence.
Ed.
Through the Chair, Councillor, which part of the letter are you wanting to see some kind of change in?
I mean, it's going to come up in the water care one as well. But I have the second bullet point under the subheading key focus areas for Auckland Transport. The work undertaken in relation to greenfields areas to adopt the council's land use strategies, including the unitary plan, the future land supply strategy. I actually think that there is a little bit more work that we have to do here before we can ensure that we can achieve that particular outcome. And it's not through the relationship with Auckland Transport. I believe it's with the application of the RPS provisions of the unitary plan. It's not your work stream, but I believe it's our work stream.
Through the Chair, we don't actually disagree with you. What we're signalling is that we need to do this work, and we'll bring it back to you in February. So we recognise there's a gap. We're trying to shore it up. This is just signalling that we're about to do that.
I just want to, Rose and Eddie and David, just refer to page 15 under the water care one, the third bullet point.
Yeah, I'm going to raise the same issue.
Which talks about out of sequence. I mean, there's a little bit of inconsistency. Inconsistency there that we kind of maybe need to try and marry up.
What number page is that?
Yep.
Find it.
Page 15.
Page 15.
I was going to raise this exact same point. It's even more explicit in the water care letter.
Yeah, so I mean, it could be just looking at the wording, how to...
Well, it can't be in there.
I see the wording that you're looking at, Chair. You like the water care wording better?
Oh, well, no, we're just putting this, we're just pointing it out.
Yeah,
There's a bit
there's
of
slightly
difference there.
inconsistent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. That possibly, Councillor Newman, does that that seems a bit closer to the mark.
Well, no, actually, the water care letter is even worse, and I was going to raise the same point then,
So
because...
it's worse, so one of them's better than the other.
Point of clarification,
Yeah.
Mr Chairman.
Yeah.
Are we, for the purposes of the discussion here, accepting that this is a letter from the Mayor to the CCOs, or is the Mayor expecting that there is a sense of ownership by all councillors in this letter?
I think the official position is that this committee is advising me, but in the end I have to take responsibility for the letter that goes out in my name. So the purpose of bringing it here is to get feedback from you so that we can take that into account. At the same time, we've sent these letters out to each of the CCOs, and two of the CCOs have come back to me. I think it's important you've got this information. Auckland Transport has made some minor amendments, but otherwise says it's very happy with the letter of expectation as worded, and that is also true of ATEED. The other CCOs didn't come back, and I presume that's because they had no significant objection, because they were invited to if they had any concerns. They have not come back with any concerns at this point, but this letter has gone out as a draft letter. If they come back before we finalise the letter at the end of the week, we would take on board any concerns that they've raised. So far, the other CCOs have raised no concerns, and the two that have taken the time to come back to me have said they think that these letters are good, that they are more specific, they are more precise, and they're very useful to them.
So what I suggest, we'll sort of go back to the little committee there, but it could be that we raise the question about that general principle with those two CCOs that it's most relevant to. Perhaps you could come back with an answer. Councillor Cooper, do you have something to do with this point?
Sorry, I don't, are we just going from letter to letter now?
I'm just trying to
or-
now finish
On
it.
Auckland
Just really hard to follow it on this thing
Yep,
as well.
well, I'm just
Doesn't
trying to
work.
follow-
Can't get no search function on here now.
I'm just trying to, has anyone got any further comment on that specific point that Councillor Newman's put up? No? Okay, so we,
No search
you
function.
do?
Find your page.
On that point.
No? Right, we have Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Chair. Look, firstly at the outset, I just want to say to the staff that have drafted the draft LOE up, for which I think it is the job of the governing body in full, and then the Mayor sends it on our behalf. I think this is totally refreshing letter. It's a real lift on where we were, and thank you for incorporating some of the feedback that I've given over the last week. Chair, as Planning Committee Chair, I've gone through and dug down into the three that report up to planning, which is Transport, Water Care and Panuku. So on transport, I've got a few. Can I just, and I'm going to whip through them very fast. The first point, I've actually got 8, 9 points. So on the first point, the rapid transit network is not emphasised here, and I think that is important. We've heard that in the quarterly report today. So I would like to see something that emphasises planning of the RTN as a key strategic priority, including early delivery of lower cost interim options. Now, I guess I'm referring there, I'm giving an EG, initiatives like the Puanui Airport Rapid Bus. Don't want to dig into the specifics, but I think it's important to emphasise the RTN. The second one, and the core of our our public transport system is the bus network. The new networks have fallen behind, and today I heard they've fallen behind another month. So now I don't know whether anybody's picked that up, but the bus network reviews, this is the new networks, are now for completion in April 18. The last we heard was February 18. So this is of real concern. So we've got to have this in here. We've got to have maintain or bring forward the timeline for delivery of the new bus network. The third point I'd like to make, and I think, David, from our late night conversation last night, I've got collaborate with Panuku Development Auckland in identifying AT-controlled land suited for regeneration, e.g. Panmure Station surrounds. But I think, David, you might have some feedback that you've been a bit more subtle in your wording to cover that.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
covered?
It is covered. It's the penultimate, well, almost penultimate paragraph that talks about debates about alternative land designated for.
Got it? Okay.
Yep.
moving on then, I think placemaking is picked up for the first time strongly in an LOE. I think we could maybe tweak it a little bit to emphasise that there is a hierarchy of users, and the pedestrian is the top of that hierarchy. And if you refer to section 751 of the Auckland plan, it actually is specific. It talks about transport planning and delivery partners are expected to achieve a balance between movement and place functions, and greater emphasis will be given to place function than has traditionally occurred in Auckland. Now, they are strong words. They're all already in the Auckland plan, and I think there's a place for them to beef up what you're already saying. The next point I want to emphasise is, and it was referred to in the quarterly report today when the chair talked about the need for integration. At the moment, we've got some issues with integration between Auckland Transport, NZTA, and other parties, Kiwi Rail, etc. I would just give an example: the Northern Corridor package with busway extensions compared with the Northwest Busway, totally different ways of doing things. On the Northwest Busway, we're wearing a lot of cost. On the Northern Corridor package, we're not wearing cost. Two public transport RTNs, totally different ways of going about it, and we've heard it from the chair today. So I'm emphasising that we work with NZTA to agree a much more integrated and consistent way of planning, funding, and implementing the rapid transit network, including protecting required future routes and progressing short and medium-term priorities. And I'll forward this through to you later. And lastly, at the moment, the words are maintaining the momentum on delivering the cycle program. If we live to that, we would be signing off to going backwards because we are behind program. So those words are, the words maintaining are not appropriate. We've got to improve, and I think we could add the words ensuring the current cycleways program is fully delivered, incorporating priority for walking and cycling into projects, and building the case for continuing central government's urban cycleways fund. I know that's a hell of a mouthful there, but I'm hoping there's a willingness that I can just sit down with the staff. I think they're all critical points, and I put that on the table for the Auckland Transport one. Thanks, Chair.
I just want to say something just on that very last point because it's relevant. I was going to make a comment on it. So David and Rose, David Warburton did point back to me. I think they're actually having a discussion on the cycling and as to whether cycling's getting too much prominence as compared to other you can hear me out if you want to, but other transportation modes like walking, strolling, dog walking, pushing your pram and that sort of thing. And I think that has actually been queried, and we're not saying very much about other active transportation modes. Yeah. Because, believe it or not, out there's a lot of people who are a little bit anti the Lycra Brigade taking over walkways, etc., when it could be shared multi-purpose use. So that is a big issue out there and could get more acceptance of cycling, and if people like Mike racing around in his Lycra, if we've got this more shared acceptable thing, but that is a very real issue. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I just raise a point of order here? Look, we're listening to all those things, and I agree with a number of the points that Councillor Darby has made, but it's really important that we don't try to write this letter as a committee and get down into the detail, because we'll never get out of here.
No, we're getting the notes.
And the past, I've checked out what the past practice is, and the past practice is we listen to all of the ideas, and then you, Mr. Chair, and I sit down and have the final say on how the letter is to be drafted, because you cannot draft a letter with 21 people. So can we just hear the discussion and the debate, and then it comes down to you and I to make that final decision?
Yep, that's okay.
Right, I'm going to have just 3 quick points. The key focus areas for Auckland Transport are obviously to get Auckland moving in a transparent, efficient and effective way. I think the use of technology needs to be explored with Auckland Transport as to how technology can assist, i.e. apps and things like that. And just one specific, you ask them in, look, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph. We invite you to consider expanding bus lane networks, extending bus lane operator hours, blah, 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 but you don't say why. So potentially, we invite you to consider expanding bus lane networks, extending bus lane operators hours to assist the enhancement and frequency of capacity, or something like that. You shouldn't ask someone to do something without giving them a reason why. And that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? Ask Auckland Transport to be more efficient in what they're currently doing. Those are my 3 points. Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Yeah, I'm actually not putting forward a suggestion. I'm just seeking an explanation what some of these fine words mean here, and particularly the ones that go to finance and value for money, looking for transparency as far as the public goes. We have a little section here that that we have sufficient detail for the public to have a good understanding about the services you provide, their cost and their impact. So what I'm wondering, Mr Chair, as I read those words, is that in specific projects or contracts, which are often the ones that public may have an interest in, under this statement of expectation, can they realistically expect to be informed how a contract is structured? And I think of contracts, instance, where there's subcontractors who are doing the work and a main contractor who just seems to be clipping the ticket, if that someone wants to clarify that, or other contracts where it may be unclear what a roading maintenance contract actually delivers and how much people are getting paid for it. Will the public have the ability to access that sort of detail to ensure the transparency which you're seeking? Because I guess what I'm suggesting is that if they don't, then we won't have advanced that much in terms of the public view of CCOs and their accountability.
So remember, these letters go to the CCOs, they then come back with their statements of intent.